Hey guys, it's Merrick, not live, and I've decided that this spooky month to drop probably one of the few videos I do of this type. Anyway, since it's the season of spooks and screams, let's talk about those enemies that go bump in the night and make us fear the dark and unknown. With all the imagination being poured into video games, it's fun to see and look into some of the more creepy adversaries we face off against. Without further ado, let's hop into it. This entry is extremely personal. I don't like insects. Well, anything that can be generally a creepy crawly. Spiders notwithstanding, depending on the circumstance, of course. Well, imagine an existing monster, one that I would say is on the weaker side of the monster scale, and give it the abilities and minor physical attributes of spiders. The Zephonim from Reaver are the horrors that you get. Zephonim never leave their clan territory, which is good for people with arachnophobia, and why they're in the number 10 spot, but even so, they have a lot of aspects that make them scary. Zephonim like to hide on ceilings and walls. They are the only vampires in the game that do so. Because of this, they can constantly respawn in an ambush, jumping from the ceiling into a combat stance on the ground. They are acrobatic in combat, jumping from floor to the wall to avoid damage when Raziel attacks, which can be a pain as there is a lack of weapons in their territory, making them a difficult opponent to dispatch with, especially with the Wraithblade. Fun fact about Vampires and Legacy of Kain series is that they pupate to mature into stronger forms, and the Zephonim pupa are freaky beyond belief. They wrap themselves, or people who are becoming one of them, in webs so tight you can see their grinning faces in the webbing outline. They don't just produce webs for pupation or habitation, as like a spider, they trap the remains of their prey in them to save for later. This detail is shown in the game by a small cutscene. Even their leader Zephon has undergone a horrible mutation. He looks like a xenomorph queen. His face opens up to reveal his mouth, and it's really fucking freaky. Plus, he's able to produce eggs, which luckily for us are sterile due to the vampire's blood curse. Zephonim are spiders gone wrong. It's plain skin crawling. Next entry. So, Star Patrol 2 is a fun game with strange aliens you can talk to. Doesn't sound like the breeding ground for anything scary, right? Well, no. Some of the aliens in this game can be freaky, such as the titular Urquan, with their uber-powerful ships and their different cultures revolving around wiping out and subjugating advanced races in the galaxy, or the Druge and their society of corporatism gone wrong, with slave trading for useless products. Only one amongst the many races in the game stand out as the creepiest, the Ors. On the surface, these parrotfish-looking aliens are very strange. So strange the computer can't properly translate some of their words. They say they are new to this part of the galaxy and are still moving here, being very openly friendly and willingly join the Alliance if asked, without provocation. They do supply you with a very strong ship early in the game, making them really useful allies. The creepiness comes in when you dig a little deeper. The region of space they inhabit used to belong to another race, the Androsin. They were once of the Urquan battle thrall hierarchy, but just disappeared out of the blue one day. Go to their home planet, and you can discover the remains of their cities. None of them were destroyed by nuclear bombardment or space-to-surface weaponry. It seems as though they were wiped out in a massive land war that also got rid of any remains. As you explore, you discover data centers that tell of the Androsin discovering the use of dimensional fatigue equipment. After visiting 3 of these centers, one of your crew studying the data goes on a rampage, destroying everything and claiming that they are coming, and all you do is need to know about them for them to get you. He is restrained and taken aboard the ship, but appears to have suffered way more damage than he took to throw him in the brig. If you ask the Ors about the Androsynth, they will constantly try to deflect talking about them. Asking them too many times will make them openly hostile, and they will try to kill you for the remainder of the game, even revoking their formal alliance if they've joined you. The Ors also openly dislike another species, the Arululalile, a species from another dimension that they call the Above, while they come from the Below. Speaking to the Arulu in quasi-space later in the game, while it can be implied that the Above is quasi-space, the Arulu also speak ill of the Ors in the same manner they do of the Arulu. While also speaking of ignorance to danger of other dimensions, being what can keep humanity safe. The only thing really normal about the Ors is their ships and gameplay. Being they shoot regular bolts of energy, and their alt weapon is sending out a boarding party of space marines, of all things. Things are never truly as they seem when it comes to space and alternate dimensions. Some crazy Lovecraft shit at play. Radioactive zombies that wander in search of flesh is the only way to describe a feral ghoul. Ghouls in the Fallout series are humans. They just suffer from a bad skin condition caused by a radioactive material. The problem is, when exposed to the proper amount of isolation and extra background radiation, they lose whatever vespers of sanity they have left and go completely feral. Feral ghouls are monsters. Poor souls that need to be put down for the sake of others and their own misery. There is no negotiating with a feral ghoul. While normal ghouls have a still human look to them, feral ghouls range in wasting appearances, looking even more decrepit and emaciated than normal ghouls. Some have lost all their skin, some have gone blind in one eye or both, others have absorbed so much radiation that they glow green and can emanate it, healing the pack from injuries. The only inquiries as to how ghouls degrade in this condition are only theorized, as most of their bodies are rotting away, which would include their internal organs and brains. Radiation heals them like regular ghouls, and as revealed in Fallout 4, large bursts, as those from glowing ones, can be used to revive deceased ferals, so long as they have a head to continue brain activity. Another creepy aspect of the Commonwealth variety of ferals is their glowing yellow eyes, which can be seen in the dark as opposed to the cataract or blind ones. Other evidence seems to suggest that ghouls are either related to or are susceptible to ancient eldritch entities that have confirmed to exist in the Fallout universe, which may be some form of divine origin, with two locations, the Dunwich building from 3 and the Dunwich Borers from 4, bringing host to this detail. Eldritch horrors really like to get around, don't they? Leaving a lot of nasty secrets in their wake. So, zombies are scary, right? Well, kinda. I think the ones in Resident Evil are. They're very resistant to damage, and they can mutate. Right! So, zombies in Resident Evil undergo a process called the V-Act, which makes them mutate as they exist. This was first seen in the remake of Resident Evil. Remember the Crimson Heads? Those guys were the first generation of the V-Act in action. Given enough time, they would start to develop more traits of the Licker, like the claws, until they eventually evolve into one. Lickers look like completely flayed corpses and like to crawl on walls and ceilings to hunt, and like to use their elongated whip-like tongues to spear and strike prey, hence the name. They're squat, but roughly stand the height of a grown human if standing, and feature huge claws of bone on each arm, which they won't hesitate to use if they close the distance. Luckily for the prey, they're completely blind. However, they're also sensitive to loud noise, which attracts them. Make too much noise and they will hone in on you like sea bears do to Squidward. The base Licker is only the beginning of this line of BOWs, including an evolved form found at the Nest facility under Raccoon City, featuring a mutated scythe-like claw and a slightly stronger musculature. Licker Betas, a slightly more intelligent and fertile variant, which is a creation of injecting a standard variant with the progenitor virus. Their newfound fertility allows them to procreate and reproduce more without cloning or using test subjects. And last but not least, a strange variant called the Suspended or Regis Licker, which appears to be a Crimson Head mid-metamorphosis into a full Licker, featuring a tongue which lacked the sharp tip and claws. This creature was seen leading a nest of creatures in the Apple Inn during the Raccoon City incident. Zombies can be bad on their own, but if they mutate into something much worse, like these guys, we'd really be in trouble. Stay silent and watch the ceiling, people. The man behind the slaughter. Yes, Springtrap. Good old Willie Afton is a creepy motherfucker. He's made even more creepy after his revivals. Afton is a man of little word, but a lot of action. His actions behind the scenes of the Fazbear fiasco practically ushered in a haunting future. In death, his soul doesn't rest as he's brought back as the rotting spring Bonnie to continue his rampage. His masterworks of death and suffering even claim the lives of his own children. What possesses a man with a family to commit heinous crimes against the peace? That is what I think makes Afton creepy. The unknown origin of his crimes makes his motives vague. What is he after? Eternal life? Revenge? Or is he just a sociopath who thought he could get away with it? Afton in the games is just as the mechanical monsters that stalk the hollowed halls of all Fazbear Entertainment locations, but he is the catalyst for how his story began. For the longest time, he was only associated with a single color, but now we have a face for this thing. It's hard to tell where the corpse begins and the animatronic ends with Springtrap, even more so when he is turned into his scrap incarnation. He even fears himself, as both of his undead incarnations stalk and haunt his personal hell. Hell couldn't even hold him for long, as now there's a digitized copy of his consciousness somewhere in the Fazbear servers. He is a cult, and if FNAF AR is to be believed, an army of robotic clones of himself. Death couldn't hold him still for long, and now it seems he might be back on the prowl, and with greater numbers too. It's no secret that Majora's Mask is my favorite Zelda game, but not a lot of things in it could be considered scary, or at least only found in that game specifically. Well, the Ikana region isn't just home to Redeads and Gibdos, it's home to the curse. The curse surrounding the Ikana region is host to a lot of conjecture. However, there are a lot of contextual clues as to what existence and obvious effects of bringing the dead back to life. One of the mini-bosses in the Stone Tower Temple is a strange creature called Gomess. Gomess isn't particularly difficult by the time you reach him, especially if you've obtained the Gilded Sword and the magic upgrade. He's a mass of bad bats forming a humanoid body around a glowing orb, and wields a golden scythe as a weapon. It doesn't attack in any crazy manner, but he can be a challenge if you aren't quick enough to dodge his attacks. None of these aspects really make him scary, though, on his own. However, contextual clues come into play. At the tip of his scythe is the skull of a Style Child. All of the Ikana citizenry and warriors became Style Children and Staphos in Undeath, showing that this thing holds no favor to the previous inhabitants, even in death. Considering that the Stone Tower was the only piece of infrastructure around before the Ikana came to power in the region. The way to expose his weakness is to shoot him with a light arrow, the same type of magic arrow that inverts the tower, and he is also the only mini-boss in the game that doesn't appear in the mini-boss cave in the region. All of this combined with his Grim Reaper-esque appearance are reason to believe that this thing is a personification of the curse placed on Stone Tower and the Ikana. Things usually never as they seem at first or passing glance. There are surprisingly a lot of disturbing things in the Metroid series, and I had a very hard time trying to pick which one freaked me out the most. Hands down, it's the X-Parasites. These things on their own are dangerous, as a single one is all it takes to kill something. They infect a host and rapidly reproduce in the central nervous system, where they absorb DNA and genetic memory of the host, while they digest it to death, after which they seek out another host in their celluloid form, or they can create a mimic of their previous host. The mimics are never one-to-one with the previously infected creatures. In most cases, the X tend to tweak or combine the genetics of their previous hosts and make them more devastating, in combat or for catching more prey. X-hosts are also susceptible to control or mutation before they are killed. X are extremely adaptable to other environments, more than likely due to their absorption of the genetic traits of their prey. They can even absorb computer data organically. When many X converge, either to infect or after the absorption of the genetic material of an extremely large or powerful creature, they become a Core X. Core X grow an outer spiked shell around their cell membrane, which can only be pierced by concussive blasts and high explosives. Some forms are impervious to such attacks until they open a portion of their shell to fire their own genetically downloaded weapons, which leaves them susceptible to a counterattack. The X were the top of the food chain of planet SR-388, and could potentially threaten the entire galaxy if they somehow made it off their world, until the Chozo settled there. They immediately understood the threat that the X-Parasites posed to all life in the universe, and created the Metroids to be a predator to control their numbers. Samus Aran eradicated all Metroids, except for the baby, which gave rise for them to start to conquer the food chain once again. When Samus returned to SR-388 as a security enforcer for the BSL, she became infected, and was almost killed, saved by a vaccine made from the genetic material of the baby. Her infected suit parts, which were removed during surgery, were sent to the BSL for study, which prompted the X to start an infestation by creating the ultimate mimic, the SAX. The SAX is the ultimate mockery of Samus. It's her without her humanity, and is potentially a way for the X to wipe out their Metroid predators. There were no more than 10 of them wandering the station on the hunt for Samus. Once Samus had the upgrades to counter the SAX, his equipment, when critically injured, it mutated into a monster which showed off the genetic traits of the previous host the X had absorbed. Its core X even retreated after defeat, so it wouldn't be consumed by the bounty hunter. These things know self-preservation, and were willing to sacrifice the X on the BSL station for the sake of the X on the planet below. Luckily for us, Samus destroyed them with the destruction of planet SR-388. These things won't be threatening the galaxy anymore. Can you believe a splinter group of the Galactic Federation wanted to use these things as bioweapons? I'm just gonna let that thought fester for a bit. These two were the source of my first fear. Bobby Barrows, aka Scissorman, is the maniacal child of Mary Barrows, and is the primary stalker in the first clock tower. His weapon of choice, true to his namesake, is a giant pair of gardening shears. Bobby might not look like much in terms of appearance when stalking around the Barrows Manor, but his mannerisms and actions while doing so are what make him so creepy. He takes sadistic joy in stalking you, and takes his sweet time to savor every minute of your suffering, dancing when he successfully overpowers Jennifer, and likes to surprise you at every inopportune time. He almost has a paranormal aspect to how and when he finds you, seemingly teleporting to rooms when you least expect him, and being backed up by the paranormal forces that inhabit the old mansion. These paranormal encounters, however, are from another source. His brother Dan, who resides in a cave beneath the mansion grounds. Bobby and Dan work in tandem, literal brothers in arms, to murder their victims, all for the sake of feeding Dan blood from young victims. Dan at first glance is a giant deformed infant. Aside from his psychic abilities, he can only crawl after his victims, which led to a seemingly swift end by Jennifer in the first game, when she accidentally ignited him with a can of kerosene. Bobby would later meet his end when the mansion's titular clock tower churns to life and rings its bells. Bobby and Dan turned out to be demon children, born into the mortal world, and needed for time to be stopped so that they could live. Scissorman, however, returns in the sequel, a little more cheesy as he is more exaggerated this time. There are in fact 3 different Scissorman in Clock Tower 2. However, we're only going to talk about the true one. Edward was a boy who also managed to survive the Barrows Manor incident. It is revealed at the end of the game that he is really Dan Barrows, and through the use of his psychic powers, influenced people through the use of something that I can't say because I'm afraid it'll break TOS. So if you're interested, there's a link to the Clock Tower wiki for Dan and Edward's page, so check that out if you'd like. And he convinced them, in order to take up the Scissorman mantle and stalk characters throughout the game. In the PlayStation remake of the first game, it can be seen that a body covered in ash is left behind after Dan's accidental immolation, revealing that the giant body was a chrysalis so that he could live outside of stopped time. Dan's motives are made worse by the novel of the sequel, which once again, I fear for TOS, so link to the wiki entry in the description. Luckily, he is exorcised at the end of the game, and being sucked into a vortex to the underworld, where he can never come back again. And honestly, thanks Celestia for that shit. These things broke me to horror. The necromorphs from Dead Space are the epitome of body horror, and show how much a single human body can be twisted into amalgamations of terror. These things kill indiscriminately to convert corpses into more of them. Nobody is spared from the rampage, including children and animals. It's not hard when looking at one to feel an aura of concentrated NO! As they just don't look right. Their bodies all consisting of repurposed limbs freak me out, and it's hard to talk about their individual forms, as each one is worse than the last. I'm going to try to start with some of the more humanoid variants, and slowly talk about a few of the more monstrous ones. This is going to be a bit of a spark note, so if anybody is interested, I also left a link for the Necromorph page on the Dead Space wiki down in the description. Slashers are the first and possibly one of the worst and most well-known. They run at you with mutated scythe-like blades to rend and tear their prey. They like to play dead and ambush you a lot. They are also the only type with the most variants, including a female subvariant called a Spitter, which, as the name implies, spit acid. Lurkers and crawlers are necromorph infants. Crawlers like to explode, and lurkers shoot prey with mutated tentacle darts. Lurkers also jump the species barrier and can be formed from small dogs, aside from infants. Pukers suffer from massive indigestion and overproduce an acidic bile that has melted away their own faces and abdomens. Stalkers are like velociraptors, hunting in packs and communicating through barks, whistles, and howls. Wasters look practically the same as humans, and are smart enough to use tools as weapons, but will further mutate after suffering major damage to either their upper or lower halves of their body. Brutes and tripods are made up of multiple corpses and are the heavy hitters of the garden variety of necromorphs. There are many more common variants, but those are only a taste of what they have. Some can regenerate, like the hunters and ubermorph, which renders the only way to kill them impossible. They are even larger, strange variants, like the Leviathan and the Tormentor, to name a few. And they can have even bigger leaders, like the Hive Mind in Nexus. Necromorphs themselves, even the larger variants, are only the pieces of a larger threat. The ultimate goal is convergence, the creation of a greater life form, a Brethren Moon. The only reason why they are at number 2 is because in a better time, all that would have to be done to stop them is to destroy the markers. They have a feasible way to stop them, but nothing happens correctly in Dead Space. It's time for some honorable mentions before we hit the number 1 spot. Seriously though, some of these guys would have been from the same series for variants, so I had to cut them. Let's hop right into it, shall we? Crimson Head, Super Zombies, like playing dead. Nemesis, one word. Stars. Chimeras. Jeff Goldblum is the Fly. Las Plagas. When you walk around Brain Slug Planet without a helmet. NMCs and ANMCs. When mitochondria attack. Fantoon. He was so close. I really wanted to talk about this guy, but he didn't make the cut. Another list another time, I suppose. Specimen 6. The Living Jim Henson Reject. Bando Gora Slaves. You don't want to sell any death sticks. The Aurum. Close, but no cigar. Now that the honorable mentions have been mentioned, it's time for my number 1 scariest enemy in video games. I have only one way to start this entry. All for us. All things in the universe will be ours. The Aparoids are my number 1. The Aparoids are a mysterious force that exists in the Lilot system, almost like an aberration. They may not look like much, being giant insects with flashing fractal patterns over their bodies, but they hold a sinister secret inside. Insects already give me the creeps, but these things... yeah. Aparoids are techno-organic organisms being host to both mechanical and organic parts, each being able to produce forms of weaponry, which can decimate in combat. They come in a variety of different forms and variations similar to the necromorphs, but not as malformed, as they all carry resemblance to military craft, though there are a few oddballs in the bunch. Standard warriors and elite warriors aside, they're host to tanks, fighters, living missiles, heavy launchers, bombers, and even turrets. They can infest a battlefield quickly through local warping technology that is in their Hatcher units, which they litter invasion sites with to eliminate the need for dropships. But I can hear the audience say, "But Merrick, these don't sound scary." Well, here's the kicker. Aparoids have a secret deadly weapon on their side. They can turn other things, both man and machine, into more of them through a process called aparoididation. How this process begins is unknown, though there are a few possibilities as to how the infection spreads. Possible exposure to an aparoid core memory, which is essentially a central processor and brain for an aparoid that can cause both machines and Cornarians to become infected. The process for infection is very similar to indoctrination by the Reapers of Mass Effect. Second possibility is through contact with a weapon blast, infecting a target similar to zombie bites as shown with infected Cornarian forces. Third possibility, an aparoid attaches itself to a targeted vehicle and infects both the vehicle and pilot at the same time. Seen with General Pepper and many Cornarian vessels, another possibility is spores, but that is only seen during the first boss fight with one variant, then never again through the game. Aparoids, like the necromorphs, spare nothing. All things will be either destroyed or assimilated. They have a hive mind and reproduce through a queen, though reproduction seems to be possible through self-replication in some instances. A single aparoid moth can wipe out a Cornarian fleet, and when the invasion of their homeworld commenced, it didn't take long for 20% of the invasion fleet to be wiped out by the aparoid forces. Notable casualties include the Great Fox, including Peppy Hare and Rob64. Their homeworld is only a facade, and their nest resides in a hollowed-out section of the planet they call home, possibly reaching the core. It is through the Queen we discover that the aparoids can consume and remember the memories of things they assimilate. The Queen is even able to replicate the voices of people in the memories as a psychological warfare tactic. The Queen believes that everything in the universe belongs to the Aporoids, and that their modus operandi is evolution. Aporoids, while they can be destroyed, they cannot be truly defeated until the Queen is destroyed too, as she is the hub of the hive mind. They are susceptible to a digital apoptosis program that was developed to specifically destroy them. Even once the Queen was forcefully integrated with the program, she still resisted it long enough to attempt to make a digital antibody for it. Luckily, she was destroyed and the Aporoids wiped out, but if she managed to gain an immunity, it is unknown what else could stop them. The scariest aspect is we don't know where they came from, how they came into existence. Imagine if the Queen didn't manage to create an antibody in the final battle, but she created a Queen embryo to start another hive somewhere else. They'd be unstoppable if all technology is out to kill you, along with infected individuals. These things could take over an entire planet or civilization with one assault. This is why the Aporoids are my number one. So, thank you guys for checking out the vid. This was really fun to pick and script my entries. Hopefully in the future I can make a few more on different topics. I do have a few others planned as, like, you know, personal project. This isn't, like, you know, the whole content of my channel, but it's, you know, it's something that I like to do for fun. I occasionally make, like, cool videos. But yeah, if you like what I do, check out my Twitch channel. Should be down in the description. I stream every night from 9 to 12. It's really fun. I do it with some of my co-hosts and friends. And, you know, we do a variety of different games. Currently we're going to be doing our 31 nights of Halloween, where we are going to be playing horror games all month, which is really fun. I also want to thank my friend and co-host, Gur Ziegler. His social media accounts should be down in the description as well. He was the one who edited this video, and I'm really grateful for that. I also want to thank my good friend Mutter for drawing up the art for the thumbnail. Her social media is also down in the channel description, description, of course. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining me, and we also got some other links down there, like the Patreon and whatnot, but, you know, don't feel obligated to do anything. But, like I said, guys, thank you guys for joining this video, and I will catch you all later. Merrick out. See you guys!